The land thirsted deeper than any man who'd ever dropped a prayer on it. It cracked wide and ragged, like the splitting of old regrets spreading in every direction, chasing no path but ruin. Fence posts sagged in crooked lines, stripped and leaning under years of sun and silence. Overhead, a lone hawk circled slow and wide, its wings cutting the still sky where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Noon laid a hush so deep the earth itself felt mute. Cicadas shrieked their hunger into the heat, but no one answered. June's hands trembled as she smoothed the dirt with a flat stone, pressing it down with sharp, stubborn strokes, as if she could bury memory itself. Her palms were blistered, her fingernails rimmed with dried blood and dust. The grave barely reached her elbows. It was all her small arms could dig. Beneath the soil lay her mother, wrapped in the quilt she used to sew by lamplight, the one that smelled of sage, lye, soap, and quiet strength, the same quilt Papa had torn from her when the bleeding started. June was 12. Her knees ached, her dress was smeared with grief, and her baby sister screamed from a basket nestled in the scant shade of a dead mesquite. The infant's cry was hoarse and raw, swaddled in scraps of faded curtain cloth, her tiny face blotchy and twisted, fists balled tight like she was apologizing just for being born. June kept her eyes away. That sound still echoed the night when everything cracked, the shouting, the door slamming, Mama's breath rasping like dry beans in a tin cup. You birthed another girl, Papa had hissed, fury boiling in his chest. Another curse. Mama hadn't argued. She'd turned her face to the wall and whispered something June couldn't hear. Then came the blood. Then silence. By dawn, he was gone. June wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing more dust than she removed. She stood, stiff and small, the sun pinning her like a butterfly to cork. The ground still held warmth from her mother's body. It hadn't cooled yet. She looked at the baby, looked away. No one was coming. No neighbor, no preacher. The town had turned its back last fall, when Mama burned the cornbread and Papa left bruises. No one came then either. June didn't know what frightened her more, the fact Papa had vanished, or the certainty he'd return. And this time, he might not leave just one body behind. The baby hiccuped, a mill-like sound, and June's breath caught. She stepped toward her sister like a girl approaching a coiled snake. Her shadow fell over the basket. The baby blinked up at her with cloudy gray eyes, quiet now, wondering. Mama named you Rose, June whispered as she knelt. Said if you lived, you'd be her second bloom. The baby hiccuped once more, then settled. June tugged the cloth tighter around her and stood. She brushed the dust from her skirt, turned toward the horizon. Micah Graves. She'd heard his name whispered outside the feed store. A man with land and no kin. A man whose wife had vanished. His fence kept no one in, no one out. Folks didn't speak kindly of him, just cautiously, and never loud. June didn't know what he'd done or why he lived so far from town. But he had a roof, a gate, no children. She lifted the basket against her chest and started walking. The road stretched east away from the grave, the house, the life that had ended, toward something that might still begin. The road blistered beneath her bare feet. Papa had traded her shoes for moonshine months ago. The basket straps carved angry lines into her arms. By the second mile, her breathing rasped like a fiddle played on broken strings. She passed a dry rut scattered with bones, coyote, or maybe just some dog that lost its way. By mile 3, she began whispering Mama's name with every step, like a prayer or a curse. By mile 4, her lips cracked open like old paint. By mile 5, she saw it. The ranch wasn't much. Dust, timber, a slanted porch with a broken rocker. One chestnut horse stood beneath the only tree still green. The wooden gate hung lopsided on rusted hinges. The fence ran jagged across the field, interrupted by piles of stone, like the earth had tried to spit out its grief. She climbed the porch and knocked once, then again. No answer. She sat. Rose whimpered. June rocked the basket with her foot. The door opened slow. Micah Graves was taller than she imagined. Not broad, but solid. His hat was pulled low, beard rough, shirt dark with sweat. His sleeves were rolled, knuckles scarred. His eyes didn't flinch when they landed on her or the baby. They simply waited. My name's June. she said, forcing the air past her throat. "This here's Rose. She's 2 weeks. Mama's dead. Papa, he ain't right." Micah blinked once. "He's coming back," she added. "I don't want him to." He looked past her, out toward the road. The baby cried again. Micah stepped aside. He didn't speak. It wasn't permission, but it wasn't refusal. June carried Rose into the cool shadow of the house. The air smelled of cedar and tobacco, old dust, and something hollow. A coat hung on a nail near a worn leather satchel, a lasso looped nearby. "To clean to be used lately." He led her to the barn out back, quiet, shadowed. "There's a cot. Water pail's full," he said. Voice gravel dragged across wood. "You can stay. For now." That night, June hummed Mama's hymn. Her voice broke on the high notes. Rose nestled against her chest. The barn creaked in the wind. Somewhere, a coyote howled like it missed her mother, too. She woke to the sound of wood splitting dirt. Micah was driving new fence posts. He swung the mallet like it weighed less than it should. Sweat gleamed along his brow, but his eyes stayed steady. The earth groaned beneath each strike. June stood at the edge of the barn and watched. "You want water?" he said. "Pump by the sycamore." She nodded but didn't move. Later she did. The water was cold, sweet. She washed her feet until the red bled through the grime. Micah passed, with a bucket of nails, didn't speak. The days fell into rhythm. June swept the barn, clean tack, kept Rose close. Micah worked in silence. Rose began to smile, crooked, sleepy, but real. At the store, folks whispered. Mrs. Dobbs watched her, like a crow on a fence rail. "That Blake girl," she said to Loud. "Cursed womb. Trouble follows." June didn't cry. She just held Rose tighter that night and whispered, "Don't believe them. You ain't a curse. You're what Mama gave me to fight it." 3 days passed, then 5. On the 7th, June swept the porch. On the 8th, she left a daisy in a chipped cup by Micah's door. No note, just bloom. That night, he left a slice of cornbread outside the barn. It tasted like a beginning. By day 10, he let her walk the horse to water. "Name's Gallo," he said. She nodded, didn't ask why. That evening, they sat side by side on the barn steps as the sun bled gold across the land. Neither spoke. Rose gurgled in her arms. Micah's voice was quiet. "A man can lose his land if he don't fix what's broken." June looked at the crooked fence, then her own hands. "Some things don't fix easy, no," he said, "but you can mend a little at a time." She looked at him, really looked. He wasn't cruel, just tired. Like the land, like her dot she helped carry with the next morning, the one after. She didn't ask to stay, she just stayed. But peace never sits long in a place the world wants to forget. That afternoon, the sun dipped low, the sky turning molten. June stepped from the barn for the water bucket and stopped. Fresh hoof prints in the dirt. Headed toward the house, her throat tightened, and then a whistle. Then a voice she hadn't heard in 2 weeks. "June bug." The bucket dropped, water sloshing over her toes. The sun didn't rise. It clawed its way into the sky, dragging heat like punishment. By morning's peak, the horizon shimmered. Fence posts looked like ghosts, the sky like a lie. June stood barefoot at the pump, cloth across her neck, skin peeling. The barn creaked behind her. Rose fussed. She rocked the cradle with her foot, trying to be to people child and mother. It split her in half. Micah worked the land, digging, hammering, his body bent to the task like it was penance. His rhythm was steady, as if the work knew his grief and matched its pace. Later, she approached him near the half-finished fence. "You always build in this heat. Only time the wood stays put," he said. "Swells in heat, shrinks in cold." She knelt, ran her fingers along the grain. "Nobody's coming from this side." He paused. "Fences ain't to keep folks out. They're to keep what matters in." She held the nail bucket when he asked, watched him work. The silence wrapped around them, soft as a quilt stitched from unspoken things. That night, wind howled through the slats. She found Micah sharpening a rake handle with a blade, sat beside him. "You think she was strong?" He nodded. She asked him not to hurt Rose. "I know," he said. "He'll come back," she whispered. "And I don't know if I'm strong." Micah's eyes stayed on the fence line. "Strength ain't quiet. It's loud in silence. It says, "You can hit me, curse me, leave me. I'll still be here when the dust settles." The next morning, June fed the chickens. Rose giggled. Micah's ranch hand, a boy named Caleb, came, 8 years old. Toothless grin. "Is she yours, my sister? She don't look like she knows what bad is." "I hope she don't." Micah taught her how to chop wood, twist wire, patch roofs. She learned fast, desperate to matter. But the town remembered. Whispers thickened like storm clouds. "She's Blake's girl." Cursed. Trouble. One evening, she found a letter nailed to the gate. "We know what she is. You'll lose the ranch next. No name. Just rusted nail and ink." Em read the letter and fed it to the fire without a word. That night, June sat on the porch clutching the carving Micah had left near her cot, a small wooden horse, crudely whittled but shaped with care. She held it close to her chest, as if pressing it there might steady the ache inside. Behind her, Rose slept curled like a sprout in spring, one tiny fist resting near her mouth. Caleb had drawn her a picture, a stick-figure baby with a bright scribbled dress and hair like wild grass. June folded the drawing into her quilt, where it lay like a secret. The barn groaned in the warm wind. Somewhere out in the dark, an owl called low and slow. Micah stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, half-shadowed. "I heard him," June said softly. "I know. I should go." He didn't move. "You going to raise her out there alone, in the scrub, in the glare and the gossip?" His voice stayed even. "She don't deserve that." "No," June whispered. "But she deserves *U*." Her throat caught. Micah turned, boots scraping against the wood, started walking back toward the house. "You ever lose someone?" she asked. He paused. "At the stairs, once." "What happened?" "She bled too long, didn't cry when she came. Thought that meant she'd live." Who was she? He didn't look back. She never had a name. Then he disappeared into the dark like a closing door. June rose early the next morning. The sky was a thin pink bruise. She packed a satchel with cloth for Rose, the wooden carving, and a single piece of dry bread. She waited until Micah rode off to check the northern line. Then she wrapped Rose in her quilt and walked toward the road. At the gate, her steps slowed. She didn't want to go, but more than that, she didn't want to be told to leave. Better to vanish on her own terms than be dragged off under someone else's orders. She reached the fence line, where the boards bent west and the road met the scrub. A shadow shifted behind her. She turned. Micah stood still, his gaze steady on her, then on the bundle in her arms. June's lips trembled. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." He stepped forward, knelt, pulled his kerchief from his pocket, and gently wrapped it around her bleeding feet. Then, without a word, he took the satchel from her shoulder and turned toward the barn. She followed. At dusk, he drove the last nail into the fence, the board falling into place with a final, solemn thud. He stood back, staring at the line of wood and wire like a man testing the strength of a prayer. June watched from the barn doorway. Rose pressed to her chest. Micah didn't look back at her. "You build a fence to keep things in," he said. His voice dropped, quieter, heavier, "sometimes to keep things safe." Later, when the wind shifted, June saw something in the dirt. Fresh tracks for horseshoes, not Caleb's light scuffs, not Micah's steady boots. The dust still curled where the prints had pressed. And then, the sound, thin, piercing, to notes. A whistle. Old and far off, but unmistakable. The same call her father used to summon the dogs before he broke their necks. June's heart squeezed. She clutched Rose tighter. Behind her, Micah's voice came calm and flat. "You feel that?" She nodded. He took a slow step forward, eyes locked on the horizon. "Then it's time." The church bell rang once from town, one single clang that stretched over the prairie like a warning tap on glass. June heard it while pouring water into the trough. It was a Sunday. The sky was unnaturally wide and still, like it had been emptied out. Not a single cloud, but the air was thick and breathless, like it had something unsaid stuck in its throat. Micah hadn't gone to town in weeks, not since the letters started, not since the preacher had begun passing by with his eyes lowered and hat untipped. June dipped her hands into the trough and wiped her neck. Rose sat nearby in a basket lined with sheared wool, her sun hat drooping over her eyes. Her soft, even breath rose and fell like a hush in a church. She was the only creature on the land not carrying fear like a burden. Micah was fixing the barn door hinges, his tools clicking and clanking in his slow, practiced rhythm, the same beat he carried in his gait, in his grief, in the way he watched. She walked over and handed him the rag he'd forgotten. He didn't thank her, but he nodded, and in that nod, something wordless passed, maybe trust, maybe understanding. Later, when she went to collect the eggs, she found the second letter. It was tucked beneath a stone on the porch. The ink had run from sun and sweat, but the words still bit. Asterisk, Blake girls don't belong. Don't turn your land into a grave. Asterisk, she took it to the fire pit, dropped it into the coals, and watched it shrivel into ash. Her mouth was tight, but her spine stayed straight. Inside, Micah sat at the table, oiling the revolver he hadn't touched. In months, you planning to use it? No. Then why clean it? He looked up, his eyes unreadable. Because I might need not to. She didn't ask what he meant. Some things weren't for speaking. Some were just meant to be carried. That evening, Caleb showed up barefoot, trousers dusty, his arms full of sketches and his face full of hope. I drew Rose, he said, handing her a picture charcoal. Lines of a baby with curls like smoke and a grin too big for her face. June laughed. She looks like a startled onion. Caleb giggled, then went serious. Mama said folks been talking. Said the sheriff and preacher met last night. June's shoulders tensed. About me? Papa said they're coming to talk to Micah. Said it ain't right. A man living with a girl that ain't his kin. Micah didn't look up from the porch step he was mending, but his hands paused, just for a breath. That night, after Caleb had gone home, June fed Rose in the barn. The air smelled of hay and old candle smoke. She hummed softly, not to soothe the baby but herself. Behind her, footsteps crunched. Micah, it wasn't him. Mrs. Dobbs stepped into the lantern's glow like she owned it. Hat tight, gloves up to her elbows despite the heat. She stood stiff like a sermon, eyes like cold nails. You planning to marry him, girl? June's jaw set. Excuse me, that man, Graves. You think people don't see? I'm 12. Mrs. Dobbs glanced toward Rose. And yet you've been woman enough to carry shame into good soil. June stood slowly, her hands gripping the cradle. You should leave, the woman said. Voice hushed and hard. Before the sheriff don't give you the chance. Before they decide Graves can't be saved. June's voice trembled, not with fear. He's the only one who didn't look at us like vermin. He took you in to prove a point. June shook her head. He took us in because my mama died in blood and asterisk nobody else did a damn thing asterisk. Mrs. Dobbs' lip curled. Mark my words, child, this don't end well for girls like you. Then she turned and left, her heels grinding across the dust. June didn't sleep that night. At dawn, she stood by the trough again. The sky hung low and gray, stormless but heavy. Mama used to call skies like that asterisk, thinking skies asterisk. She didn't notice Micah beside her until he spoke. You see her? June nodded. She's trying to push you out. She already did. Micah looked at her. You're still here, aren't you? You'll lose everything. He didn't answer, just stared past the fence line, toward the hills that still held her father's echo. They'll send someone, she said, if enough folks believe the worst. It don't matter what's true. He stayed silent. If you tell me to go, she whispered, I will. Then he turned to her and looked, not just at her face, but the weight behind it, the fight, the shame, the pieces of her mother held tight in her shoulders. I ain't sending you anywhere. Her breath hitched. That afternoon, the town gathered in the square. June sat outside the feed store, pretending not to hear the whispers. She don't blink like she's innocent. Micah's always been strange. Now he's harboring a stray girl like some lost animal. Sheriff Keller stepped out of the church and raised his voice. We've had concerns about the Blake girl. Every eye turned. June stood. She didn't shake. You've heard plenty, she said, louder than she thought she could. But none of you ever asked. Silence. My mama died birthing Rose. My father left her bleeding. Not one of you came to bury her. The preacher stepped forward. Child, your place, my place, June said sharply, was beside her grave, digging with my hands. My place was walking barefoot 5 miles with a baby in a quilt and a prayer in my teeth. My place is wherever that man gave me water and quiet and never once raised his voice." The crowd shifted. "I ain't cursed," she said. "But every one of you that called me a stain, you're the reason." Girls grow up thinking silence is safer than truth. Micah appeared beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just stood. The preacher opened his mouth, then shut it. Sheriff Keller cleared his throat. "No law's been broken," Mrs. Dobbs hissed. "Yet." June turned to her. "I won't be quiet." She took Micah's hand not to hold, but to brace herself. His palm was rough and real. He didn't pull away. They walked home through the hush. That night, fireflies lit up the fence line like sparks from a slow-burning truth. June tucked Rose into her basket, then sat on the porch beside Micah. "I'd bring ruin," she said. He didn't look at her. "Maybe she's right." June's brown it. He turned. "Maybe ruin's what this town needs." She blinked. He added, softer, asterisk to make room for something else. Asterisk. Her eyes stung. Rose stirred. "June." Rose to check her, then paused. A shadow moved at the edge of the field. Too slow for deer, too big for coyote. She stepped barefoot into the dirt. The figure was still. The hat was familiar. The shoulders stooped under something heavy. "Micah," she whispered. He was already beside her. She pointed. The figure slipped behind the hill's crest. He grabbed the lantern. But what rooted her deeper than fear was the scarf tucked into the stranger's belt. A faded rose-red scarf with a tear near the hem. The one her mama had stitched. The one she had buried with her. The sun never really set on Micah's land. It just lay down and waited. June's brow furrowed, uncertain what his words meant. Micah kept speaking, voice low and measured like a man coaxing truth from the dark. "When I buried your mama," he said, "I wrapped her in a canvas coat. Found the quilt later, the scarf already gone." His eyes met hers then, steady but worn. "You buried her." He let the question hang. "I found her body the day after you came. Thought you tried and just couldn't finish. Figured it wasn't right letting you carry that weight alone." June blinked, stunned. "You never said. You already carried too much." She sank down beside him in the dust, the silence stretching between them heavy but not cruel. It felt like a shared ache, wordless and old. "I should have known he'd come back," she whispered. "He always did. Always when things got quiet enough to make you believe maybe they'd stay that way." Micah said nothing. He laid the spade aside and reached into the satchel at his feet, pulling out a creased and folded scrap of paper. "What's that?" she asked, her voice no louder than the wind. "A letter," he said. "Wrote the sheriff. It's for guardianship papers. Preacher's ready to vouch before Dobbs gets any ideas." June stared at him, breath caught. You want to keep us?" He nodded once, firm. "Not a paper to own you. Just to stand between you and the law if they ever come knocking." She turned her head away, jaw tightening. "I don't want to bring you trouble." "You already did," he said, quieter now. "But I don't mind it." Something cracked inside her at that, something tender and raw. A warmth, a wound, a belonging she wasn't sure she could trust. Rose stirred softly on the blanket nearby, and Micah stood. "I'm going to start a fire," he said. "Keep her warm, and keep that bastard from creeping too close." June watched him move, quiet, capable, like every gesture was a brick in something he hadn't meant to build, but now couldn't stop. Later, after supper, they sat near the fire pit, Rose curled asleep between them. Caleb had stopped by earlier, left a tin of peaches and a hand-carved spoon for the baby. He'd also brought word. Sheriff Keller had been seen riding with Harlan Blake near the edge of town. June bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. "He told folks you kidnapped me," she said, "that you stole his child." Micah stirred the fire with a stick. Sparks leapt like frightened birds into the dark. "They'll believe him," she added. "I know." "What are we going to do?" Micah didn't answer. He stood, disappeared into the barn, and returned carrying a small carved box. He placed it gently between them, kneeling beside it like it held a prayer too sacred to rush. Inside were baby shoes, a yellow ribbon, a worn Bible, and a letter still sealed. He didn't explain, just lifted the tiny shoes, cradling them in one hand like memory had weight. She was born quiet. He said, didn't cry, thought maybe it meant she came peaceful. That maybe God gave us one who wouldn't hurt. June didn't interrupt. She bled for 3 days, Micah said, eyes fixed on the shoes. Doctor never came. Neighbor told me I should have buried the child sooner. Said it wasn't right to keep holding her. His jaw tightened. But I couldn't let go of the last thing that ever came from love. June reached across the firelight and laid her hand gently over his. The shoes, small and fragile, vanished between their palms. You didn't bury her in anger, she said. That makes all the difference. Micah gave a slow nod. My father's coming, June said after a long pause, and he'll bring noise with him. He always does. But I'm not hiding this time. Micah's gaze sharpened. What are you planning? I'm going to tell them. All of them. What he did. What I saw. What Mama whispered when he thought she was too weak to speak. He hesitated. They won't believe a child. I'm not just a child anymore. Micah studied her a long moment, then nodded. Then I'll stand beside you. The next morning, the sky was pale as bone light, uncertain, as if the sun itself was hesitating. June washed Rose's clothes, folded them into a satchel with care. Caleb brought word again the sheriff's hearing would be at noon on the church steps. Harlan was calling it a reckoning, claimed a drifter had stolen his daughter, cursed him by taking a child that wasn't his. They're calling him righteous now, Caleb muttered, kicking at the dirt. Like losing your mama made him holy. June scoffed. He's only holy when nobody's looking too close. Micah touched her shoulder. You sure? She straightened. If I don't speak now, then she died for nothing. At high noon, they rode into town. Micah's wagon creaked along the road. Each will turn like a drumbeat. Rose slept against June's chest, wrapped in a soft blue shawl pulled from the bottom of Micah's old trunk. Townsfolk watched as they passed, some with pity, others with suspicion, a few with barely hidden contempt. The church bell rang once. On the steps stood Harlan, flanked by Sheriff Keller and 2 council elders. He looked polished, pressed, and clean, but his eyes were unchanged, still hollow, still cold. That's her, he said. That's my blood. And that one, he pointed to Rose, was born of a cursed woman who died in sin. June didn't flinch. She climbed down from the wagon and walked straight toward the sheriff. I want to speak. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. The sheriff hesitated. Micah stepped forward. Let her speak. Harlan sneered. What's she going to say? She don't know her place. June turned to the gathered crowd. Her voice, when it came, was clear, steady. You want the truth? Fine. She looked the sheriff in the eye. He beat my mama when she told him she was pregnant again. Said no more daughters. Said he'd rather bury us all than raise another girl. Gasps, whispers, shuffling feet. The night Rose was born, he watched her bleed, watched her die, then walked out and never came back. She's lying, Harlan snapped. June raised a hand, silencing him. Mama whispered something before she died. Said, protect Rose, don't let him name her. Because names are power. And you don't get to name this one. You don't get to call her yours. Harlan's hand twitched near his belt, but the sheriff stepped between them. That's enough, he warned. But Harlan pushed forward, voice rough with rage. She's mine, both of them. Micah's voice cut through the air, quiet but firm. No, they're mine now. The crowd held its breath. The sheriff looked between them, then spoke. The council delivered its decision. No man's got the right to take children by threat or shame. Harlan lunged. Micah moved fast, not to strike, to protect. He caught June by the arm, pulled her behind him. His voice stayed calm, steady. You touch her again, he said, and you'll be buried in dirt nobody grieves over. The sheriff drew his pistol. Harlan stepped back. June looked up at Micah. You didn't let go. He met her eyes. Not this time. Behind them, thunder rumbled over the ridge. A baby cried soft, not afraid. A wind shifted in its direction. Before dawn the next day, the wind came low and hot through the grass, whispering of something coming. Trouble, maybe, or something braver. Micah stood by the barn fence, eyes on the eastern sky, spade in hand, though there was nothing left to dig. Inside, June tied up her boots, scuffed, a little too big. Rose slept quietly in the cradle Micah had built with rough hands and steady care. The baby didn't cry when June held her. Not anymore. She took the faded scarf from the drawer, the one they'd found by the fence, and tied it around her waist, not as memory, as defiance. Micah met her at the door. "They're coming," he said. She nodded. "Let's not run." No, together, they walked to the gate, boots crunching in sync. At the crossroads, Caleb waited beside the sheriff. The preacher stood behind them, papers in hand. A quiet crowd had gathered, curious, cautious, and some clearly ashamed. Then the hooves came, loud through the heat. Harlan led 3 men, all armed, none in uniform. Their horses looked wild-eyed and mean. Harlan's face might have been carved from stone. "I've come for my blood," he said, "and I'll take her now." Micah stepped forward. "She's not yours to take. She's mine. You lost her the moment you tried to break her." Sheriff Keller raised his hand. "You had your say. Council ruled. You got a complaint, file it. But come with a gun." Harlan reached for his belt. June moved first. She stepped between them, voice sharp as flint. "You didn't come to raise me. You came to erase me. Like you tried with Mama, like you'll try with Rose." Harlan's eyes twitched. "Girl, I remember how your hands looked when you walked out, and how you never looked back." The crowd stirred. A woman gasped. June lifted her chin. "You don't get to decide who I belong to anymore. You lost that the day you made me dig my mama's grave." Harlan lunged. The sheriff moved, but Micah was faster. He shoved Harlan back without a punch, just a clean, final rejection. Harlan scrambled up, eyes wild. He reached again, but it wasn't Micah who stopped him. It was Caleb, quiet, kind Caleb, who stepped forward and knocked the pistol from Harlan's grip with a rock. The gun thudded into the dirt. Sheriff Keller kicked it away, gun drawn. "You're done, Blake. Ride out or be ridden in." Harlan looked around. No allies, just faces watching, judging, remembering. He turned, mounted his horse, and rode off, not fast, just far. The crowd slowly dispersed. Sheriff Keller gave Micah a long look. "You keep a quiet ranch, graves and all. I reckon you've earned a quiet life." Micah nodded. June watched Harlan disappear behind the ridge, her fists clenched so tight, her nails cut into her palms. Blood bloomed in half-moons, but she didn't wipe them away. She walked up the porch, gathered Rose into her arms, and held her close. Micah followed, sat beside her on the steps. His boots tapped slow against the wood. She leaned into him. No words needed. For the first time, his arm came around her, not like a man reaching, but like one returning home. The sun struck the cross on the far hill, just as the wind fell still, and the baby laughed.